Yeah, it's the same issues. So great. Kentucky might have facility that I look at that article. Having yeah, having so many people here with so many visions without rivals, yes, sorry, so like it is. Start recording it as people trickle they can also share.
People and some.
But yeah, for us, this was a really important part of the process because this is how we get to hear from all of you all, and so we get to hear from the people and try to see what the community envisions or what the community is seeing for their future. So I was just wondering, is there anyone who would like to start? Presumably, the Lenape person who would like to share, their what they're seeing. And the question, the prompt that we have to start, we have two more, is if resources were unlimited, what dreams would you create? What food dreams would you create? So if resources were unlimited, what food dreams would you want to see in your community? And so this is primarily a question for the Lenape folks, Nanticoke folks, locally indigenous folks. And it could be maybe expanding a dream you already have going on, or maybe seeding a brand new one that hasn't even come into existence. We have some new chairs in care we chance.
So maybe I can just say a little bit about logistics too. Okay. So we moved up dinner, so it's going to be at 5 instead of 5:30, and so our notion is just to do this for like an hour or so, and then Lila has some closing thoughts. And she has a little presentation she's going to share, and then we'll adjourn the dinner. Okay. And then so we had said the end around 7, but more like 6:30. Okay, 6:30.
Yeah. So yeah, we might end an hour early. Half an hour. Okay. So yeah. So yeah, we'll just run an hour, and then
And where did everybody go? The other people were kind of invited guests anyway. You're the people that are important to us, so we're glad you stayed. So thank you, and that's why they left, because they knew they would not be that helpful here. Because this is the visioning part. This is your vision. Okay.
Right. So thank you. So we think that maybe. I actually want to say a prayer or ask someone to say a prayer first, because I think this counseling is such a sacred time. And the name of Patzakes, the time when you think and you brainstorm, it's a very sacred part of a 4-step process of creation. So to us, this is a really exciting time when our minds come together and our thoughts come together, and they don't have to be polished or perfect, thank goodness. But it is a special plan. And so we're thinking maybe we could turn this gathering into some form of a launch pad where, who knows, maybe something can come from our gathering. So would anyone like to say a prayer before we start, just to create this sacred space so that, so that we can think and speak it away?
I'd like to ask Becky to turn off any recordings for their prayer, please. I'm going to.
Thank you. I just actually setting on piece for the foundation of this. Does anyone have any thoughts or ideas they want to share? If you don't mind using the microphone, because then we can transcribe it, and we promise to not ever share it with anyone ever without everyone's permission.
Yeah. We should have said it at the beginning. That's the same for the recording.
The same for everything.
We really just want to keep that information so that we can remember exactly what you said, how you said it.
Yeah. So that would help us to in giving you all a report of what happened. So yeah, does anyone want to answer this question or some question like it?
Like, say something real quickly. It's very important to me when I think about my community is to develop some processes that will help them decolonize. Because they don't even know how colonized they are. And we all know, I think, as Native peoples, Native leaders, that the path to health, both spiritually and physically, is in that decolonization process. You know, I said it last year at this meeting, but to me, that colonization is actually having passed through the colon of civilization, where they strip you of every cultural necessity that you have, and they replace it with their values, which are very different than ours. So developing a protocol that we can incorporate in our teachings to our tribal citizens that will help them assess themselves of that degree of colonization that they're suffering from, because I see it everywhere in Indian country. When you have Indians fighting Indians, that's colonization as much as you can get it. So when we move into the area of growing foods that are going to feed our people, they have to understand that this is an act of decolonization. When we return to our traditional diets, we wouldn't have all of these health issues that we're suffering from now. And I think that's a tool that is going to be very important to do, just simply because we have to get them to cooperate with this effort and support us in these projects. When I develop a CSA, a community supported agriculture project, I need my citizens to come and support us. And they're going to need a reason and a purpose to do that, which in my view is that decolonization. So I think that's a good platform to really start from, because all of our communities are suffering from that decolonization, or from that colonization, that returning to our song, our culture, our cultural attributes, and I think it's very important.
Thank you.
Just to piggyback on that a little bit, when I look at the board, it says, what would the food dreams you would like to create? Put a ceremony back in food. That's part of Chico, who was talking about the decolonization. So much, and ceremony is is more than just a few words that somebody knows. It's getting in the ground and doing the things we need to do to work with Mother Earth, to understand, like you were speaking about earlier, about sometimes a certain crop isn't going to do as well as another crop. We don't need to manipulate that. We can get to that point through ceremony of letting nature take its course. And that's more about being in ceremony than about being in a mass production type of farming system. That's all.
Chuck.
Thank you. I was just gonna kind of piggyback on some of what they both just chatted, just echo in agreement how food just brings us together, right, in general. And just like many of our, just like former Chief Coker just mentioned, many of our communities are struggling. You mentioned the infighting. We're no different than every single UV SAT that are having these same issues, right? And food is what brings us together. One of the things that our organization is doing is just that. So we do an annual pawpaw planting, and we thankfully are having, even within our community, folks that are typically at strife or having issues with each other, coming together, planting pawpaw seeds, so that we have those seedlings get back out into the community. I think those types of activities and those types of
opportunities to kind of see a common ground and also learn is really the way that we're going to decolonize and stop the indoctrination, right, and self-hate and things that have been taught to us that we need to break. So, and it foods the way, right? So, looking forward to that, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Can I go get your name? Sorry.
I'm Keisha from Lenape Indian Tribe. What's up? Something.
Yeah. Oh, can we?
Kyle, you're much better at this.
And I would humbly ask if you spoke once to let everyone speak before you speak again.
Okay, I'm Terry from Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania. And I'm listening to, everyone talking about what they're doing. And one of the things that I've done, and I haven't, it not necessarily through our tribe, but sort of as a quiet, sneaky representative of our tribe, is things like making sure that other people get what they need. I had a little red car up there. It's fondly known by some people. Once I say it, if you go, you know. It was called the turkey truck. And I have frozen turkeys that people would bring and drop on my doorstep because they knew that I would make sure I got it to the people who needed it. And I helped people from other tribal families to make sure they had turkeys, or whenever they needed it. I worked along with a church who had big freezers, and I would make sure that I would bring turkeys from Cape May a couple hours away and make sure those freezers are full. Now, at the beginning, the place that was distributing didn't have a whole lot. But since then, we've helped them establish a huge food pantry and they feed hundreds of people a week. In Reed Sharing, we've been the recipient, they're sharing now, sharing that. And I think that it's a good idea for us to, how do I say it? For us to network with each other and make sure that everyone's taken care of so that then we can reach out into the larger community and become a presence. That's how we're going to spread the good work that we're doing. And the other thing, and this is, I always say that before, whenever I have a chance, Chief Chuck Mills, everyone here is doing your part. If they weren't, they wouldn't be here. Just make sure that you're looking out for your next keeper. You're all keepers of what you're doing. Make sure you're looking out for your next keeper. Because if you don't have someone to pass down what you're doing, and I don't mean just the physical stuff that you're doing or your property or whatever, your passion. Make sure that you pass your passion down to another keeper. And someone that you can trust that won't seem like they're gonna do really well, but then as soon as you're gone, they just kind of drift off and do their own thing. Make sure it's someone you can trust. Everybody's wanted. The biggest things you can do is to find the next keeper to bring it down to the next generation. Because not only are we reestablishing our customs, our traditions, but being a keeper is one of our biggest. Because we would have none of them, we would have nothing to pull from and nothing to learn from if someone didn't trust us to be their keeper. Now it's our turn to find the next keeper. So while you're doing the work, be sure that you're looking for the next person to carry on your work.
not just plant the crops, but plant the passion. That's all I have to say.
I'll just say something very quick. My name's Cinnamon. I come from a time back in the 40s when there was war. I think I spoke about this the last time, where there were bread lines where you stood in line and hoped that you could get a loaf of bread or even a couple pieces of bread during wartime. And the neighborhood was where I lived in eastern Pennsylvania on Lehigh Street was a mixed neighborhood, and everybody helped each other out. We had what was called victory gardens. I think I talked about that before, where we all grew specially things that we were special to grow as. Now back then, I could not say I was an Indian. It was very, very scary, and my father family said, "Don't never tell anybody that a Native American." So next door to me lived the Jewish people, and they owned a deli, so I decided I was going to be Jewish. So I told everybody for a long time that I was Jewish, but I started out by saying my word today is gratitude and gratefulness. And I'm so grateful I'm not out there in the 40s standing in a line trying to get some bread, or Wednesdays was the soup tack, it was pea soup. I hated pea soup, but that was the only thing that you got on Wednesdays. So where we are now, we're rich in so many ways, but we have to watch because there's evil here. And we have to stick together and make sure that we stick together and we grow the fruit and we share it with one another. There was an old movie, and I don't know if anybody remembers it, but it happened to do that. People were starving, so they said at age 65 everybody had to die. I think it was called Solomon Real. Everybody had to die at age 65. You can sit in this beautiful chair that went around and showed you the world. And they wondered, well, what happened to the dead bodies? Well, they turned them into green vapors, and that's what fed the world. So we don't want to be there in that movement. We want to help each other. You grow tomatoes and you grow lettuce, we could get together and have beautiful salads. So I'm grateful to be. That's not really
Coisa. Usei o
So I was thinking about when you were saying that it's important to bring ceremony back into our gardens and planting, and for me, like that also reminded me that for us it's so important to bring our language back into these practices, and learning our languages and growing our foods are such an interconnected process. And as we've been working on language revitalization in our community, we're really starting to learn and remember how much knowledge is embedded in our languages. Knowledge about our plant relatives, how to care for them. What are things that our ancestors knew about these plants and these relatives, and how can we bring that knowledge forward today? And so, we've been trying to think of all these different ways to reincorporate our language and get more people to learn it as a way for us to connect with each other, our ancestors, and also our plant relatives. And then, like most of our Eastern Algonquin languages, we all have that recognition that these plant relatives are, they're alive, and we can speak to them that way. They're not these things. They're not these objects. They are they're beings, and our languages really give us the tools to be able to connect with these relatives in a meaningful way. And I know another, especially when we're thinking about ceremonies, for so many of our communities, there's so much knowledge that's been disrupted and lost, but we also have opportunities to create new traditions and few ceremonies that are still in those same meaningful ways that are. It may not be the exact same ceremony that was conducted, 400 years ago, but it still is carried with the same intention. And as people today, we still have that ability to continue to create. And so creating these ceremonies and these songs and traditions that are going alongside our planting traditions is just something that I'm really excited to see, what more we can do.
So you can't have one of us without the others. So I just have two quick points. Backing up of food. Where our communities are based in Delaware is, you said the soil is sterile, because the microbial life has been eradicated because of industrial burning practices. And that's the problem. And in addition to that, we are in highly polluted areas. The DuPont legacy is Delaware based. And in Millsboro, where the Nat Cove tribe is based, the largest shaving processing company in the region would take chicken waste and created it to a sludge and spray the fields with that piece. Boop. And so it is quite toxic and dangerous and detrimental to human health, and has even causing cancers and miscarriages and asthma and serious medical conditions. So what Food Dreams would be we would create access to a healthy soil, healthy places where our community can actually grow food and not poison their bodies. And if that's, going outside of where we're based today and creating community gardens, I think that that's one step in the right direction. But making sure that we are restoring the ecosystem and then the soil and on the land is critically important. Second point was, I think a plant dream that I would create was, Corral and I were on a boat last year. We were visiting Thompson's Island, which is a former Nanticoke ceremonial site, and we had to be taken there by a predominantly white nonprofit organization to stop and say, this is your place, you can't step on the land, you can't go near the shore, but you can look at it from the boat. There's still people were trespassing and going there and digging up bones and ceremonial items, but you can only look. And one of the people said, when they were there on the soil, we saw this plant that we knew was really important to the Nanticoke community. That's all she said. So I pulled her aside afterwards and I said, Megan, what'd you see? She goes, sweetgrass. Hey, you don't just drop this, play dumb, and not allow us to reconnect with this beautiful, ceremonial, critical relative. So I would say the other G would be access, and to remove the gatekeeping and to remove the secrecy that exists today.
Oh, thank you. Anyone else?
Ideas, thoughts? One thing we're curious too about is climate preparation or climate resilience. If anyone has any solutions or ideas or visions around that, we're very, very receptive. But what kind of things would you like to see in your communities in terms of food, in terms of food access, in terms of what kinds of foods, et cetera?
Real quickly, and I may not need a mic, but
If you wouldn't mind helping.
yes, exactly. When we talk about foods, I think that we need to be referring to traditional foods. What foods were traditionally consumed by people? And a couple of 2 years ago, I began doing these medicinal plant walks in our state parks. You know, we advertise a lot with taking place, and people would show up to go on the walk, and we would walk around and show them the medicinal plants that existed within that state park. But the important thing that I learned through the whole process was that we need to teach our people to make food their medicine and medicine their foods. That way, on a daily basis, you're treating yourself to help build up the immunities that you need to fight off these foreign viruses and bacteria. And it's not as hard to do as you might think. It's just knowing what foods are medicine and you incorporate them into your diet. It's pretty simple. I identify at least 60 plants that were Lenape medicinal plants.
16 or 60?
60.
Yeah.
60, which is, quite a number of plants. And I'm sure there are others out there that have, fall inside of our radar. But that again is that education piece that we need to be talking to our people about. When I have trouble sleeping, the first thing I do is I make a cup of chamomile tea. And I had never finished a cup of chamomile. In the mornings, there's a half a cup sitting there on my bedside table. And then I see these people that are eating all of these pharmaceuticals trying to sleep, and they go into such a deep sleep that they need more pharmaceuticals to wake them up in the morning. It's just a rat race of chemical invasion of our bodies, which does not happen. It's rare that you can overdose on a medicinal plant. It is very rare. I mean, there are some that are pretty toxic that they have uses too. They would cause you to throw up, and that was the treatment for what was ailing you. And so it's just knowing some of those nuances of that treatment, but. We need to go about this very smartly because it's going to be very difficult to change behavior. Human behavior is one of the most difficult things to change. So we've got to have a strategy for making them come with that transition in mind. A lot of our traditional foods weren't the most tasty foods out there. I mean, we've been conditioned with salts and sugars to the point where if it's not salty or sweet, we don't want to eat it. And, now if that sweet comes from a maple syrup, you're not too bad a shame, So, and there are some good salts out there, some salts that have 90% of the nutrients that a body needs to function. That table salt that you're spreading on your food every day is probably not a good salt to use. But there are some things that we can do, and again I go back to that education piece. We certainly need to develop that aspect of the work of decolonizing our diets.
Yeah, and I want to just jar our imagination a little bit too. Like, for instance, what would you want to see here at Duke Farms? Because I know they're wanting to increase relationships with Lenape peoples. They're wanting to increase land access, like you were just saying, and they're wanting to be in right relationship
Of course, the best thing they could do is give it back, but, you know, well, one step at a time, one step at a time. Yeah, but like, that's maybe another thought experiment when we think about, you know, what kind of plans do you see, what kind of projects do you see in your communities? I personally see, you know, more edible neighborhoods where it's interesting, this European way of landscaping. It's all about ornamental plants. And even, you know, dry it here. But these could all be edible nut trees, fruit trees. Even that's what the Breve Gocre in Brazil do. They plant along their roads, their pathways, their campsites, and they have seasonal civilization. So each spot has, you know, food for when they get back the next time, and augmenting the edibility, the edibleness of our surroundings. I think about New York City, you know, and how much better off they would be if they planted fruit trees and nut trees instead of, I don't know what their standard is, but it doesn't seem to be about edible landscapes. And I've been going to a lot of landscape architecture conferences, and they're not really talking about edibleness about it. Talk about all the things: climate, shade, green zones. But even in terms of our urban planning, we're not talking about how is it edible. Of course, I see, like you said, all the old plants and animals, space being made for them. The fish, of course, I learned last time, was so important to you guys. How do we facilitate the fish populations? I don't know. But yeah, is that maybe that jogs imagination? Did it not work? We can happily go to the next question. But any ideas after hearing some of those things? Yeah.
My 2 words were peace and hope, and both of them have been accomplished. I also am very inspired by many things. The 2 women in their beautiful ribbon skirts have inspired me to want to do mound planting. Your hemp has inspired me to want to talk to a farmer I know that they might be willing to lease some land. But that's like a dream, and I'm putting it out there right now. Because I know there's a lot more to it than just that. And I'm inspired by Chief Coker's wise words of what we have to do to inspire our communities to eat better foods. I'm inspired by, I'm sorry, really bad with names, so sorry, can you tell me your name? Lila. I'm inspired by Lila because I asked her about our youth and how to try to dig them out of their phones and electronics and help them to be more interested in their cultural ways. And one of the suggestions that she made was to take a youth and put them in charge of the youth, because we've been trying to put our younger, as in 40 and 50-year-old people in charge of our youth, and they're not responding. So I think I have thought of the perfect person. And he just, about a year or so ago, had a little boy himself, and he was named after Chetan. And I believe that he is the person that I want to approach, to ask to be that person that reaches out to our youth to help them to want to be more involved, hopefully. We're also going to be using a tulip poplar tree and digging it out for our river journey for next year. Hopefully they're pretty good at that. So it doesn't sink and implodes, but nevertheless. So, and I really want our youth to be involved because they're pretty much, for the most part, non-existent. I think they have an ear to know what's happening, but I don't think they want to engage. So I really want to get them engaged in all of our Lumas here in our tribe are all always trying to do what they can, but yeah, so that's my thoughts, and that's why I've been inspired, and I will not give up on the growing of hemp.
Had that go, she had that here.
Paul? She wanted to be Jewish, so now you're what?
I just wanted to say real quick, piggybacking on what Lila said, there is an organization in Philly called the Philadelphia Orchard Project that I'm serve on the board of, and we have about 70 mostly tiny orchards around Philadelphia. Some of them are 4 trees and a patch of some vegetated perennials. But I mentioned it because the organization is, we recognize that all of the land that we do our work on is Lenape land, and the organization does not contain any Lenape people, and we're trying to find ways to build bridges of solidarity, and we did a few years ago bring a bunch of plants up to the Muncie Three Sisters medicinal farm that Chief Man and Mikey run. That offer will be extended, if it hasn't already been extended, to all of you. Anyone who has land-based projects, even if it's just your own front yard and you want a few, native plants. They have not just things like apples and pears that come from Europe and Asia, but things like service berries and maypop passion fruit vines and a lot of these plants are available. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out to me at some point.
So one of the things that I think is really helpful is we all are echoing the same sentiment that, we want our communities to be more engaged, more engaged, and it's really going to take these incremental steps. And back to food, we're talking about food, maybe having the opportunity to, and you mentioned access, maybe having the opportunity to harvest service berries when they're ripe, and then having a program around that and cooking or eating something that contains it so that folks are, eating that native food and getting used to it. Like I mentioned, you do the pawpaw seed planting. Well, then they make ice cream and we give it to folks. And they're like, it's awesome, right? So now they know what a pawpaw is. They never knew what existed, even though it's right in our native lands. But they've now also tasted it. You could do the same thing with, maple tapping is really hot right now. We do that too. Having people taste the maple syrup. There's so many foods, like you mentioned, that are native, but inviting people to eat. And taste it, and realize how they can prepare it, right? And it might be these little gatherings, and those things, if they're done annually, or if they're done in a situation like, the Duke Farm, maybe people will, more of our community members will come to it because they hear, oh, so-and-so went last year, let's go next year, kind of thing. And they look forward to it. So just a suggestion. Very good. Oh, I like it.
With an unlimited budget, I'd like to see a fusion between AI technology to relieve us of some of the laborious jobs that need to be done, to free up our time to enrich ourselves culturally and allow the Bayless time to heal. I think that's one thing about a farm in general is everyone associates it with work. It's like, ooh, but I got something else to do. So, but eliminated some of that. I think the producers would love to see you come out and actually get boots on the ground at the particular places. And then as things start to yield and they can experience in that kingdom and enjoying those things, I think it will build the environment for the culture to flourish, and will by nature create those associations we're trying to form. And just again, create prosperity, food security versus insecurity. And that totally eliminate that and allow us to maximize our efforts with the help of the aid of technology. Becky?
Give my step.
I remember last year when we met at Rutgers, we did this roundtable discussion, and a lot of us talked about hunting and fishing also with that process. And I just want to mention that, over the summer last year, after this first conference that happened, I talked a lot at the conference about fishing in the Delaware and fishing in the tributaries of the Delaware. As a child, with my grandfather and my father and all my relatives, and one of the big things that we did was shad fishing in the spring. When the shad run started, we would harvest the shad, and a lot of people harvested just for the roe. We ate the whole fish, and that's a boaty fish. Okay, really boaty, but it was tasty when you had it smoked or cooked good on your grill. So over the summer, we were contacted by someone who was bringing South American people up to the Northeast to do a little bit of a healing ceremony throughout different areas. And we coordinated with her to meet us at where the Lehigh and the Delaware meet. And we did ceremony there. They were from probably the Andes Mountains. They had, I don't want to try to mess up their tribal name, but each group, whether they were from the lowlands, the highlands, or the plateaus, their style of headwear was different. So you could identify what clan of that tribe they were from. And we were at that place because they were asking me, where is a significant place for healing that it is more or less like for the ancestors that suffered, right? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, our ancestors suffered when they put in the mill race dams and stopped the runs of our traditional fish.
What were they called, sir?
The mill race dams?
Yeah, the mill race dams. The fish can't climb those dams, whether it's salmon or shad. Any migratory fish can't make it up over those dams. So we went to where those confluences of the Lehigh and the Delaware River meet in Easton, because on the Lehigh River side, there's a small dam there, and the shad don't run up the Lehigh anymore. There are other rivers that have, through nature conservancies and reestablishment of original flow of the river, the Pawn's Kill, I believe, is one of them in northwest New Jersey. It's a tributary off the Delaware. They took down that mill race, they took down the dam, and within 2 years, the shad are running up, spawning it now. So the spawning is coming back. And that's key, because when you think about, every tribal entity, the food source is important, the traditional food source. The most typical, most widespread example of that is what they did with the bison in the plains. That's the one that's most relatable for everybody, whether you're indigenous or not. They wiped out the buffalo because they couldn't contain the plains tribes any other way than through that decimation of the food source. So when you look at that, it may not be a direct connection to our reestablishment of decolonization, but it's an important part because those fish, the South American people, it was funny because they spoke mostly Spanish and some of their tribal dialect. We spoke mostly English and some of our tribal dialect. So we had a translator. But through the translator, the one man was talking about a story of a young man that was fishing, and he was along the river, and the trickster came along, and the trickster wanted to know what he was doing there. So he decided that instead of telling him the truth, because he thought the trickster would get mad for taking the fish, he said, I want to learn about the fish. I want to learn what they do. I'm just here to observe. I'm not here to take anything. So the trickster turned him into a fish, put him in the water. And when he came back out, he went back to his people and he said, they are closer to our relatives than we believe. Our children have to go to schools. They have to learn things. Fish swim in schools. There's certain fish that are better medicine than other fish. There's other fish that live off of other fish. You know, the same as we are walking in this world. So through that connection, we need to remember that the fish, you know, and all of our relations give us life. So we're all connected. We're all relatives. And if we see a body of water that's dammed up and the natural flow of the traditional, the native species of fish is being affected by that, we have to be able to do something. So we went down there and we started doing ceremony at that confluence. And hopefully, at some point in the future, somebody's going to look at that and say, we need to take that down now. You know? I don't know if we as a people could do it, but we as a people with help from others might be able to do it. Well, and that's an important thing too.
I think Mr.
Well, they took that clanked so we could do it here. Thumbs. Yeah.
Just real quick to piggyback on what I would like, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Just in addition to what I said earlier, I think that will allow us time to in line with all these different MO runs and allow us to be stewards again. We spend our time, our freed up time, not procuring food, but managing what's left and left behind, you know, to really clean it up. That's all.
Excellent.
Anybody?
Oh, I know questions.
Yeah.
So, make a vote.
My question is this: I like the point that you made about good dams, and this is in New Jersey at the Lehigh and Delaware River Med. And I was just thinking, all of the United States, they put up dams, little dams, big dams.
That's it.
And you just said, I think that's what you were saying. So all of us come from different places. Is there a way we can research in our communities where these dams are?
You take the dams.
Get it, the dam. Because I used to but Klamath Falls. That is a sin to stop the animal, whether it be walking or swimming, from going where it needs to be going. It really is a sin. Because they've been doing this, but like come up the law with a view down around. And for us to come and manipulate them to not be able to follow their course is truly is a sin. So I heard what you said. So I gave you all homework to go because you Google. So with the Department of Engineers, the federal government engineers, because I did that dam in Johnstown. Well, they have a record of every dam they've done. So I think I'll start there. Okay. And I'll send it back to, I'll report back to, who's in charge here?
I'll say with the Shumash, that when the bus driver was in the Channel Islands, Malibu, basically, and the bus driver was speaking of all these Shumash people from a ceremony. And he said, who's in charge? And they had all these women just started laughing. They said, Creator's in charge. He's in charge. But anyway, so you want somebody ideas? Specifically, I'm wondering if people have any advice for me personally and for our program regarding
climate, how to prepare for climate changes. And yeah, if there's anything to be done around that from your perspectives.
Now, last year in New Jersey, we had a drought, and we were ordered not just use sprinklers, not to use a lot of water to where, and the water comes in cold in your house, time that's a message every couple weeks. To remind you to turn off the sprinklers if you have sprinklers, and reduce your water usage. So not using your washer, not taking showers, baths, whatever. And everything had to be limited. So I did. And my grass was brown, and some of the neighbors' grass was green. Turned their sprinklers on. And my plants around my house, I just kind of watered with a gallon can by hand and just poured your water right on the roots just to keep everything alive. So I don't know what this year is going to bring, but it's not too encouraging when you think that you might not be able to water your plants. Now, I did plant the beans, the squash, and what McGee sent me last year, corn. And it did grow, and it came up, and they were wonderful, produced. But I had to hand board them. And so that's a question of what's coming. And I know there's some forest fires now down by Cape May. So you don't know where that's going to spread through the Pine Barrens, if it's going to hit Monmouth County or not. The other thought I had was I'm in a town that has a community garden space. So there are acres and acres of land that you can kind of rent, I guess, from the town. And you can have as much as you want for growing on. People do. I think they charge you a little bit for the water that you're going to need. But basically, if you didn't want to have a garden at home, you could have something in a community garden. And there's also one at Tinted Walls, which is the next town over. They have beauty garden at their historical center. So there are other opportunities. But our county, Monmouth County, is so loaded with farms that there's a farm stand on every 300 feet. There's somebody's got a farm stand up there with thousands and thousands of whatever they produce, even eggs. They rebound, people buy the eggs and leak the money. And horses. We've got more horses in Monmouth County than they have in Kentucky. So it's an agricultural place in Monmouth County. And there's not a lot of interest to go out and work yourself to death, because all you have to do is ride up the block, you buy own vegetables, fruit, anything else you want for a minimal amount of money versus trying to do it yourself. So that's the problem we have. We have an abundance of everything. And of course, we get a lot of tourists from North Jersey and all over that come to the beach. And they fill up their cars and go home with trunks loaded. My son is one of them. Lives in New York City. And he comes down every couple of weeks and fills up his trunk with everything. So it takes it back to the city. It's cheaper to buy it out here than it is in Newport or maybe a lot of places. So we don't have a problem with scarcity. We have a problem with
abundance. Is answer problem. It's a good problem.
Just because of the nature of the location. The soil, that's why they settled there, because it was enriching our. But they want $500,000 for a half acre to buy out. And that's just in the text that people up office the other day. It's like my land value more than my house. It's the land. It's always the land. Always will be the land. The land. The land. The land. So, Lila, you asked a question about climate, and I think this community already has the answer because we've observed over the last couple of years that the native plants are doing way better in a dry climate. And it's not that they're doing great, but they're more resilient than other plants that we've planted instead of them, right? So I was just asking Oscar, I'm pretty sure it's our beach plums and our huckleberries that have done pretty well, even though it's been very dry. And I know that Rob has often observed that the Pu'em corn actually did okay during a drought season. So I think and then I know I grew Lenape beans for Nate's EFN network, and I think that also did pretty well when it was dry. So I think we already have the answers within the community, and what we're really maybe hoping to do is bring back some of those plants. And if we are, maybe we're already climate resilient just by being wise about what we grow and share, so.
So when they make us splash last summer, we went with them on routine, and it was the first day of a drought that lasted for several months. And I was wringing my hands because the squash was not sprouting for several months. And then late eyes, peppered, and squash dream. And the squash knew when the time is right, when they were ready, they were going to be. And so it's a matter of listening, being patient. I was not patient. We planted the seeds again. Being patient and listening and remembering that these plants, you'll look you're doing. This is their home. It is built into their DNA. And less so Pennsylvania, but definitely in Delaware and New Jersey, we are coastal communities. And as we're looking to steward land for NRFF, a big issue that we're encountering is saltwater intrusion. And salt water that is making it impossible for plants to grow. And then the night is eroding into the water, or else Fred might usually coming. So when I think of climate change, I'm not sure how we tackle that, but saltwater intrusion is a huge, huge issue, and ghost forests popping up all over our waterways.
I would just echo what Denise said. I mean, the indigenous knowledge is incredibly wise about the interconnection. So if you look at the Hudson River and the giant oysters that provide food, there's a lot of groups showing now that actually oyster berms replenish the marsh land. They act as natural filtration in the ocean. And the practices of the indigenous communities let those animals thrive. And so again, it's like I actually think white people like me need to go to the indigenous people, because I actually think they're the ones that know the answers.
I can follow up that the same thought. I mentioned already the diversity that exists in that Maycock squash population from the Nanticoke people. And my seed company, the seed company side of our nonprofit, has been working to create new populations of seeds that have that mimic that kind of diversity. So by taking the old inbred heirloom varieties that are very uniform, but very susceptible to diseases and pests and droughts, if you take 10 of those or 20 of those and grow them all together for a season or two, and then you offer those seeds to people as a adaptation mix or a breeding mix, so that they can plant them in their own gardens and see what survives. And I think more and more small farmers especially are starting to realize that we can't rely on corporations to provide the seeds anymore. We have to do the work ourselves. It's not going to fit in the capitalist model, but it's going to help us to survive.
while they were giving back to life. Okay.
Sorry, but that was an important thing you said, and I would ran out of space.
They got on video.
Okay. So we're gonna move a big transition to another question, which is what commitments? Maybe commitments is a strong word. What do we want to do this year together, tangibly? Is there anything we like to do this year? The first question was if we had, unlimited resources, and I don't want to limit this question either, but maybe what is immediately doable or desired that is doable by our circle here? If anything, maybe we're too busy doing our own thing. I know Native women, we're constantly, battling 1,000 things at a time, and we don't have a lot of free time for more projects, and the Native men too, but maybe there is something this group would like to do together, maybe something small, maybe something large, maybe something that's turnkey already, we just gotta show up. So any ideas for?
And also, if you just need a little help, what do you need help on?
And you just need a little help. What do you need help on? If you had some, go in, having you do a service to it. Yeah, what can we co-create or assist with this coming year until next time we meet like this, or maybe we'll meet at. Yeah, but I'll shut up. Any skills on that?
You're probably gonna kill me if I say this, but more this. Like, I'm sure the planning team. This takes a lot, and this is really good opportunity to meet with our relatives, other relatives in different communities, and opportunity to meet with others and allies, and then also the challenge to bring one or two others from our community so that this network grows. Because I'm sure we're all thinking of somebody, who should go here, that kind of thing, or who might find interest, or who would we want to, like my 16-year-old son, I would love to, for him here as well, to kind of, first of all, be in all this positivity and knowledge and things like that, but that might be something that sparks the youth or, anyone else. So I would just say more.
We would not kill you for that. We like that. We really like to hear when it's like, this is working, and people like this. Although you said, how do we don't work, but for instance. I'd like to read, well, I think that visibility is very important for the natives. Incredibly important for the natives. I think the world needs to know what happened. They already know other things have been said, but they need to know about the resilience, for instance. They need to know about the ceremonial landscapes. They need to know about ceremony. They need to know how healthy this may be. The native culture was to thrive and to be a lifestyle. What we're trying to do is create that visibility with our people. I would ask your help on this. Please. We see that you can change the world. Look at Netflix. Oh yeah. Look at Asia. Look at all these. How many people have not turned on your TV and seen at least Movie One documentary? You need to see. Look at you. Look how beautiful you are. How knowledgeable you are.
I was thinking about another tangible, practical, thing that we also got out of this particular gathering. And I'm thinking about expanding our seed network and our sort of places where we can plant them. Because I know, I'm sure even Luke knows this very well, we don't have a large number of any of these like heirloom seeds that we're talking about. And there are, even in the different places that each of us have available to grow these plants, we may have different obstacles or different possibilities. So one of the problems that we're having at our property in Delaware is that it is very, very, very close and surrounded on multiple sides by GMO corn. And corn needs space, it needs isolation. And so everything that we're growing in our garden, we're having trouble being able to sort of maintain our own seed saving practice because of all of this GMO intrusion. And we're trying a few different things as far as like this year we're going to try planting it earlier. Hopefully the weather will go along with that, right? But we also have partners in New Jersey who like the seed farm and other places where they have more isolated properties where they are actually able to grow this corn out very specifically for seed. And so thinking about everybody in this room, and I know many of you have talked to Nikisa about all these different new properties that are in different places, and thinking about what do those properties look like, what's around them, what are the possibilities on that site, and maybe creating a better and stronger network between all of our different communities in this region as far as where are some good places where we can continue to grow out our own seed banks basically, in addition to being able to grow enough for our communities to like actively use in each cycle. So yeah, just kind of thinking about some of those possibilities.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Greg, and I think that following up on what you're talking about, the intentionality, which is a word I used this morning, of transferring knowledge and skills. So many of you I've spoken with today and have invited you to come to our gardens. I want to go out to Minnesota and then learn and see and work with and then bring that back to my community. I work with young people, kindergartners, second graders, primary school, middle school, and high school students. And last week, we had a hunt in our Bourbon garden, and they found what kind of fish. Look at this, Dan, I got a tomato, I got this, and they got string beans. I put string beans out there for them to examine, because they're going to start growing these things soon. We're going to see. And as soon as we got back inside, they're up, Mr. Greg, can we open these string beans up? I'm like, yeah. So they just jumped right into opening and finding seeds, wanting to save them that they can plant later. So in us bringing some of our students into Delaware, and me and some of my staff coming out to visit you at a certain point, I've asked Lila to come be with us and our farmers out in the rural areas, and then come and speak in the urban area as well, to translate and transmigrate all of this information, and we gain visibility in this way with each other, and we can begin to grow. That's something that can happen immediately. So that's what I'm extending from my program, and those who want to know, I have some literature for you about what we do, and I'm available, and I want to be and work with each other.
Yeah, so if you would like some of, is that correct?
Yes.
Grow seeds to help them grow them out. Be sure to give her your address before you leave, and she could perhaps mail you some. I would love to try. I don't know if it's proper to grow them or anything, but any other people want to say anything? Well, no. There you go.
Bruce, I was local here like 500 years ago. I mean, but anyway, I had a couple thoughts. So
Okay, this is Serbia. So, did you hear about the core condoms? Core condoms.
Saying, but then they can just do, yeah, because it just keeps that ball from getting on your stuff. But
See, we actually, okay. Nobody else went there, Corral. Well, I was thinking of this that you're making up out of corners, and that was my thought. And I was trying to consider innocent dipper bags, innocent.
it's not that which is a lady figure out. And then in cases, what we also have done when I start, because I also have the GMO, but most, like, I'm places now that are safe. But I've grown on places that are not so safe, and you know, that pollen could go everywhere, right? Okay, so the other thing that I did is I was always told to seed the seed for the middle and eat the edge, right? Because anything on the edge is going to be more like not the you know. So I mean, I just always practice that when there's some other varieties around, right? But I think this idea of this network of where to grow seed sanctuaries or whatever, I think that's a good strategy. Right? And then I was listening to some of your, you know, what you're talking about. And I was up in Vermont at this farming conference, and you guys get to see this stuff all the time, but I don't know those people where they're kind of, you know, so they had like a farm, just a farm, and they had kids come there, and they had like badges, right? And they had like that cheese making badge. You know what I'm saying? They had like all these weird little badges. So I'm sending you the badge, right? But it was like a, you know, it wasn't like a 4-H program. And it wasn't a Girl Scout program, but it was still the same kind of a club thing. And I think that the little kids would kind of like that stuff. You know, I could see it, but then I was, of course, like making it cooler. Because like I'm having a negative part, you know, like what's the word? You know what I'm saying? What's the, you know, and then get the cool tool in or like, you know, but I just kept imagining that. So I've been thinking about that for our area. And, you know, I mean, you know, we're closely related in language. But I think that whole idea kind of like, because the age group you're talking about, you know, you see those boys have like no place else to go. It's an this is like we used to go versus granny. But my point is, it's like younger kids are easier. That's correct. You know, those teenagers are kind of punky. Yes. I know that, you know, and so that younger age is easier to get in the garden.
Yes.
You know, if you get older guys, like some kind of cool ass, like, you know, cool thing to do there, like the horse and the, you know, filling, like that's just like they gotta show how manly they are. I mean, I have a lot of boys, you know, that show you how, you know, they got that or stuff, but I think that we need to develop those kind of education programs that are like indigenous farm education programs. And I'm sure there's people doing it, like down in this, you know, in other territories. In our area, I don't think so much. You know, I just know because I've been looking around, but I just wanted to say that because it's, you know, because, you know, those guys up there, there's a lot of people who got my blood and they have a whole curriculum. Now I get, you know, hook you up with theirs, but I was just going to, you know, because you have a hominy making badge.
We do a lot of that based on African food pathways, culture. That's certainly connected with the indigenous operation from South Carolina, hence coastal cousins. Mine sit in South Carolina. We are partnered in there. And my thing is, we're talking about the young people are not coming, they don't get it, they don't want to participate. But we're working with twos. I'm planting seeds here. If I have 60 young people, which I do now, fully half of them are going to get the blood to want to farming and kill hunter. And then if we introduce indigenous culture, history, terminology, songs, all that. I learned song today. Style behind. I was singing.
Kind of cool stuff like soil testing and then the dryness and the brown. Like I didn't know any of that stuff that they measure on. You know, like
we teach a little bit toys with toys and games. We've found out the parts of the plant that they don't eat, and so we're about that. And so having this cross pollination and having you come into communities that are not familiar with the Lenape or any kind of indigenous culture at all is crucial to me as, again, being an extended family member of of you all, relative in a way, is crucial. And that's why I want to make these connections and bring those in. And those are things that I personally could do immediately. So with my organization. And so I'm extending that's an action step that we can take it with a grant plan. Again, I asked Lila to come visit us at harvest time. I don't want to do that before Indigenous Peoples Month. I hate those. I like it should be every day. Well, like stabbing an issue. Well, that's not a month. Every day. What is month? Every day. Let's celebrate each other. And we're developing those plans. So again, thank you. Yeah, and you're correct. Working with the ladies is crucial to extending this knowledge base to a generation that doesn't know anything about it.
Great. Well, apparently, dinner's ready soon. I don't know how far that was so fast. Yeah. So, but I did want to end. I was mostly going to give my presentation to fill in the time and also to share, about the research. But I just want to just say the brief, cliff notes of it, because I think it is important, is that, and some of this I've already said in some form, but that this whole Turtle Island was heavily managed by indigenous peoples. It was never wilderness. It was never terra nullius. Indigenous peoples populated the land densely, and our food systems were extremely productive and able to support those populations. I just went to Hawaii to check out their taro patches and their fish ponds, and I was walking along this lava rock wall up in the sort of a shallow ocean part. Obviously, a desert, only. Shallow ocean near Gilda's rock wall. And there was holes in it.
Oscar thought you were pretty smart.
Yeah,
Come now.
And I was truly astounded by this Aukupua system, which is the whole watershed is a food shed as well. But the thing that struck me was that the local Hawaiian Kanaka Maoli guy, he said that demographers, people who study the ancient populations and the settlement sizes, and they estimate how many people were in Hawaii. And they said there were more people in Hawaii in around pre-colonial times than there are today. And they produced 100% of their food locally. Maybe a few cousins would come from Tahiti to bring some things every now and then, but it was by and large, 100% of the food was created through this Ahupua'a system, which every part of the elevation was turned into a different kind of garden. And today, there are less people living in Hawaii, and 90% of their food is imported. So if indigenous food systems were so primitive and couldn't be scaled, can't be scaled up because we have 8 billion people now. Oh, we're going to feed that many people with these cute little indigenous practices. No. If we want to feed 8 billion people, these are the practices we should be using because they're extremely productive, they're extremely efficient, they're extremely regenerative, meaning they leave the land better than they find them, and they're extremely sustainable. All of the food systems that I examined were thousands of years old. One that I like to talk about is the clam gardens of the Pacific Northwest, where they also create, I know this word, intertidal rock falls. And this intertidal rock fall, which does not have holes in it like a fish pond did, when the tide rises and then it lowers, that wall captures water on the other side, making these pools. And these folks, the Snohomish, the Heiltsuk, a lot of the Pacific Northwest tribes, they created hundreds of kilometers of these rock walls, and they created hundreds, or rather thousands of square kilometers of clan gardens, clan houses out of thin air. And then dated these walls. They were 3,500 years old, 3,500 years old. So we've been at it a long time. The business of adding value to the ecosystem, the business of contributing as a species to the ecosystem. And what I love about the clam garden is that it's not just designed to feed humans. Everybody feasts on it, the raccoons, the minks, the waterfowl, and that was by design, that these food systems, indigenous food systems, are designed to feed everything. And they're not human-centric, right? We're really trying to create food for everybody, even the non-humans. And the clams are seen as equals, so they have their own nation. So I always say, if we can take something as simple as a clam and not only be equal to it, but give it its own nation, then we'll truly be a mature society and civilized society. And the other thing, of course, is the burning. I can't overstate it enough. We created this annotated bibliography, and we have the water chapter, which is all about the water fishery studies, the earth chapter, which is all about soil, study, indigenous soil sciences. And then the third chapter, the fire chapter, is like twice as big as the other ones because there's so much overwhelming research about the regenerative positive force of fire and how indigenous peoples shape this entire continent through gentle, routine burning. And I told that story around the buck as a farmer in New Mexico. And I said, why don't you try it? Just do an 80 test. Burn half of your field and don't burn the other half. Of course, it was in fallow times. And so he burned one half, didn't burn the other, and the burn half was remarkably more green, remarkably more lush, that it was more biodiversity. It was the grasses and the other plants in that part of the field were taller. And so that ash from that fire is so yummy for Mother Earth. And if we don't burn, she'll take the fire herself. Because if we don't burn and all those fuel loads build up and up and up and up, and the trees grow so close together because they're left unkept, then they all compete for the limited water in the water table. And they suck it all up, and they become extremely dried out, and they're competing for limited nutrients. So their immune systems are compromised, which can lead to more pests and fungus and blight. And of course, the sunlight is limited because they're crowding each other out. So you're going to get all of them growing really tall and skinny trying to get the canopy. And so if we don't thin the forests routinely and keep them burned in between the old growth, that they can collapse into these really thickets, which are dried out, which basically become a tinderbox waiting to catch on fire. So in Australia, when the size of Italy burnt down a couple of years ago, I really appreciated the Australian government's response because they acknowledged that this was not just due to climate change, but it was due to the illegalization and the prohibition of Aboriginal fires, which had kept the land in check for millennia. And then all of a sudden they couldn't burn for 100 years, and it became an extremely flammable landscape. And so in America, we don't always do that. We love climate change, which is a part of it, but we don't acknowledge that our ancestors were imprisoned for burning the land. As early as the 1600s in California, the Spanish were incarcerating Native peoples in the missions if they ever burned the land. So burning is a careful thing. Obviously, we have to do it in collaboration with experts. A lot of whom are these Native experts from California who never lost their burning traditions. But the Great Plains, was routinely burned. Echinacea, all these medicine plants thrive after fire because they co-evolved with human fire for so long. And the bison really thrived in the wake of fire because those nutrient-dense grasses would come up and the bison would be attracted to that and they would have really yummy food to eat. And interestingly, when you put all that ash in the soil, you create a healthier soil, a living soil, and a spongy soil. And that, interestingly, increases the way it soaks up the rain. The water infiltration rate increases when you're burned routinely. And some studies on the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana, they could tell Their ancestors have been burning there for, many thousands of years. You can see through sediment analysis. And so it's amazing to see how fire, ironically, can help restore the water table by bringing the water deeper and making that soil more spongy, recharging the aquifers quicker. And in that sense, the Ogallala Aquifer, which runs from, South Dakota all the way down to Texas, and I think even larger than that, was ironically facilitated by fire, by that constant burning of the Great Plains, and how fire and water work together. And especially when you thin your forest enough, you're really helping the water table. And when you burn, you keep all those saplings and all those shrubs from taking off, and you really help maintain those meadows in between. So the Great Plains and the tall grass prairies, as we know them, were man-made in a sense. They were created by our ancestors through the gentle and supportive application of fire. And I could go on and on. We know the Chumash people in the Malibu region have hunted sea otters out of there for 8,000 years straight without end. We know they harvested abalone for 11,000 years straight without end. So we've been doing this a long time. I love what people were saying, that the answers are already within us. And I think the goal is not to look out there for the answers, but to let the ancestors speak to us from within us and help us remember who we are, which are master gardeners of the earth, master landscapers of the earth, sciences that are extremely ancient. And these sciences were not just given to us in a moment, they were learned through trial and error. We saw mass extinctions here. We were here when the megafauna were defeated. We were here when we made mistakes. My people in Chaco Canyon, we created a caste system of slavery and before Columbus was ever born. And the high priests were at the top, and Creator gave us a drought to destroy that city in the year 1100. And we were so grateful because it gave us the courage to change. And then he created from those ashes of the collapse of Chaco Canyon, which had 5-story buildings, in the year 1100, and, hundreds of thousands of logs were used to build this city, which we know from the strontium isotopes came from 100 miles away. These logs were carried for 100 miles back in the year 1100. And it wasn't the high priests who were carrying the logs, if you know what I mean. And so this was a problem. And the Creator gave us a drought. And then from the ashes of that collapse of that very lost culture, we are now egalitarian people. And all of our clans are equal. So a lot of our sciences, a lot of our knowledge were learned the hard way. Many of us know about the great law of peace of the Haudenosaunee and their prophet who came peacemaker. Well, my friend Teresa Bearfox, who's Ganakahara, the Mohawk, she said, well, the reason the peacemaker had to come is because we had so much war. We were ripping each other apart. And the peacemaker came and taught us how to work together. And she said the Seneca, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Tuscarora, the Mohawk, now they all work together in one confederacy. But she said they used to fight like cats and dogs in very violent, bloody ways. And so it's through our ancestors getting burned and feeling the pain of war, feeling the pain of drought, feeling the pain of starvation. The mound builders, too, they say, were building those mounds to get high to God, and only the high priests could live on the top, and all the lower people lived on the bottom. And they finally got to God. God said, what are you doing? Stop acting like you're better than those people. And he also demolished the mound building civilizations with natural catastrophes, and they were home. So we carry so much beautiful knowledge that we learned from our mistakes and from our successes. And we're the tip of the spear of our ancestors, and we are the moment right now where we're creating all these dreams. And I really deeply, deeply believe in each and every one of you. And I'm really, really excited to keep working together in the future. And I just have to say, I was completely blown away by all of you today, and the beauty of your knowledge, the beauty of your value system. That's the thing the boarding schools couldn't take away. It could take away maybe how we did things or some of the words of the songs, but they could never take our love away. And our love, like you said, is what creates those ceremonies, what our ancestors used to create those ceremonies. That love and that value system of caring for each other, reciprocity, of being in the back of the line, all of that has never gone away from our communities. And I think that's so beautiful, that we never lost the heart of our people and the heart of our culture. We might have lost some of the logistical details and the other details, but the core, almost like the software, of the computer never went away. And I'm just more and more proud to be Indigenous all the time, especially after sitting with you all today. So with that, let's go ahead and have some dinner if you're hungry yet from lunch. And enjoy yourselves. We have plenty of time. And then we'll go ahead and eat whenever you want to. We're technically here till 7, so thank you all. Or maybe you should sit open prayer. Would you be open to that? Yeah, as you kind of open it, it's a prayer. Say, I'm sure. Yeah.
Sherry, you know, carve down the Naywalk is a conjecture, Mactome, Gan, Jane, and October Club. Wanishi, what she abo a colligation. Wanishi, Ila Billy, Gay, or Kametha mention. Creator, we thank you for this good day. We thank you for all our relatives. We thank you for the food and the water. And let's eat.
So wait, ask her why. Where did you figure out?